Martis rightly said, cloud computing is about how you do computing and never cares about where you do it from. A very good morning to all. I am Brianna Rajan, and on behalf of the entire team organizing this session, extend a welcome, big and warm enough to encompass you all to few moments with people working in one of the most dynamically changing fields of today, computer, and one of the most focused fields of today, cloud computing. Welcoming all to our session on leveraging the importance of cloud computing, organized by the Department of Computer Engineering of Don Bosco Institute of Technology. It was predicted a couple of years back that by 2020, we would be using around 40 zettabytes of data. That would be approximately 1.7 MB for every person using it every second in this world. Now, these predictions were made way before we had the slightest idea of something like COVID-19 could happen. And after the happening of COVID-19, after the pandemic happening, we all saw a massive shift in almost all fields, right from education to schooling to businesses. Everything took a swift turn from actual happening to virtual happening. All of this definitely has generated way more data that we predicted and than we expected. And all this has thrown a bigger light on the field of cloud computing. The cloud is basically a metaphor for the internet. Now, though there are emphasis of a network-based computing back in the 1960s, it wasn't much needed then. Why? Because we didn't have much data being generated back then. But this 21st century, rightly known as the computer era, saw a massive shift in the way things were happening, and the amount of data generated were completely massive. All of this resulted in an idea of why not, instead of buying and owning and maintaining physical data centers and servers, why not we just rent them? Why not we just access technological services like computing power, storage, and databases from a server provider? And all of this led to an idea of cloud computing. Data backup, disaster recovery, virtual desktops, software development, easy testing and big data analysis. The elasticity that it provided, we could actually shrink. We can only pay for the amount of data and services that we actually use. The agility that it provided, the easy deployment options that it gave, all of this gave a massive thumbs up to cloud computing. And all of this is enough to emphasize on how important cloud computing and data storage is and the importance of this session today. I would now like to invite Dr. Amaya Kumar Tripathi to introduce this topic and our speaker for today. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Priyana. Good morning, everybody. As Priyana has told, the cloud computing is computing based on the internet. Where in the past, people would run applications or programs from a software downloaded on a physical computer or server in their building, cloud computing allows people access to the same kind of application through the internet. In short, cloud computing is becoming a new normal. Cloud-based services are ideal for business with growing or fluctuating bandwidth demands. There are many businesses moving to the cloud nowadays, and it's because cloud computing increases the efficiency and helps improve cash flow and offers many more benefits. The beauty of cloud computing is that the servers are off-premise, out of sight and out of your head. Suppliers take care of them for you and roll out regular software updates, including security updates. So you don't have to worry about the wasting time maintaining the system yourself. So leaving you free of focus on the things that matter, like growing your business. So when your team can access, edit, and share a document anytime from anywhere, they are able to do more together and do it better. So cloud-based workflow and file sharing apps helps them make updates in real time and gives them full visibility of the collaboration what is required. So with cloud computing, if you have got an internet connection, you can be at work, and with the most serious cloud service offering mobile apps, you are not restricted by which device you got in your hand. When you make the move to the cloud computing, all files are stored centrally, and anyone see one version of the truth. So greater visibility means improved collaboration, which ultimately means better work and healthier bottom line. When it comes to the lost laptops are $1 billion business problem, and potentially greater than the loss of an expensive piece of kit and the loss of the sensitive data inside it. Cloud computing gives you a greater security when this happens, because your data is stored in the cloud, and you can access it no matter what happens to your machine. And you can even remotely wipe data from lost laptops to it doesn't get into the wrong hand. In the era of digital transformation, data-driven industry leaders are looking to the artificial intelligence for the future of data management and analysis. In many ways, AI and cloud computing make the perfect match for the digital innovation. AI's cognitive capabilities and machine learning thrive on massive volume of data, which becomes scalable and instantly accessible in the cloud environment. Companies that leverage AI in the cloud set themselves up with the huge critical advantage. Today, we have Mr. Gaurav, founder at CollabAce, to give you more insights of AI in the cloud computing. Mr. Gaurav has 20 years of industry experience and has worked in different roles for companies including Microsoft, IBM, Brocade, before founding CollabAce Innovative Private Limited for last 6 years ago. And he, along with his team, has spearheaded and driven high volume turnkey projects for enterprise from various business domains like BFSI, retail, ITES, manufacturing, contact centers mainly located in the Western states and USA. He has been a Microsoft certified trainer for 10 years and above, and delivered more than 10,000 hours of training on traditional as well as modern technologies such as Microsoft Private, Microsoft Cloud, Private Cloud, Microsoft Azure, Azure DevOps, Microsoft 365, Enterprise Mobile Device Management, Microsoft Communication and Collaboration, and Modern Workplace. He holds a diploma in business administration together with industry certifications. Currently, he and his teams are working on Project Phoenix, an initiative to bring an immersive experience to the industry novice and help them to overcome the anxiety, but bring more curiosity. I welcome you, sir. Now the platform is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. I hope I'm audible to all of you.
Yeah.
Yes, you're audible. Just before you start, I would like to make a small announcement.
Sure.
We have a question answer session after the talk by Gaurav sir. So kindly post in your questions in the YouTube chat box and also the WhatsApp group. Your questions would be answered. Thank you. Over to you, sir.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay, so I hope my screen is visible as well. Okay, yeah. Good morning, everyone. It's almost getting afternoon, depending on where you're joining from. And thanks a lot for that warm introduction. Of course, I may not kind of deserve that, but then hopefully we'll have a conversation with all of the participants who have joined in, a meaningful conversation rather than a monologue for this 1 hour, which I have today with all of your faculties as well as the students, or I would say curious minds who have joined today, right? So as our respected professor, he mentioned, my name is Gaurav. My full name is Gaurav Dharasania, and I'm going to represent no one today. Rather, I would represent myself in the sense, bring in some industry case studies and some industry use cases around the very well defined cloud computing terminology as well as services by Brianna. Will kind of delve into, or get into the various different use cases around cloud computing and the services, and also kind of make use of this time to bring you certain thoughts on the table in the terms of what could be the career options you may look forward to as you've kind of graduate yourself from DBIT, of course. Also, when you've kind of take your first step or your fresh first step in the industry, what are the variety of the options you're looking at in the market? And with all the uncertainties right now we are into, of course, we'll try to find out certain positivity also via this session today, right? So thank you once again. Just to quickly brush through the slide, I'm not going to spend because of course there was a very detailed introduction done already. Just in case if something was left off, and also wanted to put a context to today's session by giving my introduction. As Mr. Amit already mentioned, my name is Gaurav Dharasania. I've got a humble experience of not more than 20 years. Started way back in 99-ish, 2000 in this industry. I'm currently employed in my own company rather, which as an enterprise consultant, which I have founded myself, and we call it as CollabAce Innovative Labs Pvt. Limited. It's based out of Mumbai and London, and we are opening sooner in Australia, Melbourne region. I had a chance to work with Microsoft in the past as a full-time employee, along with certain enterprise companies such as IBM, Brocade, and these are all companies. What you see today are actually making some good amount of positive noise around the cloud services, and I had an opportunity to work with them during those days when the cloud was actually blooming within these companies. Hence, had a chance to kind of go to backstage and see what the overall mechanics of cloud is. Also had an opportunity to work with a company which is known as NTT Data, the same Japanese organization which has taken over a company called NetMagic in Mumbai, wherein I was part of the team which was kind of designing the overall services for the customer around cloud computing. So maybe I'll take a privilege today. Of course, I've got a mic, so I've got a privilege. But then I'll take a privilege today to kind of let you know the backstage components of the cloud computing, because a lot of times I know we start with cloud as being defined as a metaphor, right? Honestly, it's now becoming more than a metaphor. So we'll see whether it is really a metaphor or whether it is really more than a metaphor as far as the cloud is concerned. Now, just to kind of put some context there in terms of the industry use cases which I can bring on the table today, which can help you to put more questions and craft your questions. I had a chance to work and kind of work around certain large enterprise transformations, which is typically aligned in UK and European regions, and of course some American states as well. But of course, I started my career in India. So I've got 5 years of experience in India region and the APAC region before I moved to UK and kind of worked there with the enterprise customers. So kind of bringing in the 15 years of experience from those regions as well. The credentials were already shared, some certifications, of course, which but I don't want to kind of highlight these certifications, but kind of wanted to show them here in the sense that these could be your roadmap as well in terms of while you graduate from the institute, but then eventually when you pursue your professional career, what could be those certifications you can eye on, so that you can very well drift around all those possibilities around the industry, which is typically the cloud these days. Now, fundamentally, I'm sure 2020, in the year where we are right now, this specific line itself doesn't make any sense because, um, directly or indirectly, we've been connected to cloud in some shape or form. And I'm sure you being part of the engineering, esteemed engineering college, DBIT, you would have surely onboarded by your professors and by your teachers and by your faculties in terms of the various different possibilities what you could do around cloud computing. And I'm sure that could be one of your learning areas as well within your curriculum. But then the fundamental conversation which I wanted to bring on the table today is, why cloud. And when we understand why cloud, then it becomes more easier for us to understand the various faculties within the cloud, and understand these faculties, and then probably shape our career, our mindset in terms of where do I want to go in the specific arena of cloud, right? Because to be honest, as the as Brianna mentioned, it's a metaphor. Yes, it started with as a metaphor, but then it kind of graduated now as a full-fledged career. Right, so a career cannot be metaphor right now, right? So it is completely graduated and blossomed into a larger career, where now where we stand, we see there is no other option than cloud computing and the cloud services and cloud products, etc., etc., right? So the fundamental question is, why is that people are talking about cloud, and what are the various industry use cases? I want to use this time to kind of discuss, first of all, how did the traditional ways of working were involved in a large enterprise, maybe, and then how does cloud brings value proposition for this large companies, and then we'll kind of define certain parameters around cloud, and then maybe we can then see what could be those interesting areas which you could indulge yourself into, so that you can pursue that as one of your ambitious career, I would say, rather not just a career but ambitious career. Yeah. So I would just want to kind of go back from this slide and come back to the whiteboard, and just do some whiteboarding with you guys before we kind of go back to those boring slides. Now, as far as the cloud and as far as that enterprise scenarios are concerned, right? As I said, traditionally, right, which means before cloud, or rather before 2007, before 2008, uh, and even today for certain enterprises, um, there are three very important components which used to be there, and which are of course there even today, which typically needs to be taken care of, or which IT services typically in terms of products, in terms of services, etc. And if I talk about those different three components, one is the user itself, right? So we've got the user. The user could be from various different personas. I'm sure, since you come from the background of information technology, these terminologies which I'm going to use today is going to be very common for you. I hope so. So, typically any enterprise, if I kind of, break down into silos and break down into simple silos, we've got the user who has to be taken care of. And these are our stakeholders typically, right? Whom we kind of service them by introducing various tools, services, blah, 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 right? And then typically we've got the applications, correct? So, in any enterprise, there could be various different applications. It could be the applications related to HR. It could be application related to finance. It could be application related to collaboration, communication, and various other, use cases could be there, which kind of, constitutes towards the application. I'm sure, again, as part of your curriculum, what are the different type of applications one could build and one could use and leverage in a given enterprise. So typically, in any enterprise, we've got the user, we've got the application, and very importantly, the data, right? So basically, when the user accesses the specific application within the enterprise, eventually they create the data, or they may consume the data, right? So typically, if you see, there are three different components which are involved in any enterprise, whether it is small, medium, large, extra large, doesn't matter. But these three components are there. If I simplify, any IT services within the company, they are taking care of these three components, right? Now, in and around this, of course, you'll have the user management, you'll have the user mobile device management, you'll have the enterprise mobility management, you'll have the HRMS application, we'll have the SAP application, you'll have so many different sort of application depending on the various business, various vertical, etc., etc. Again, the data could be the a structured database, or it could be a non-structured database. It could be just a flat file. It could be a file server where the documents are stored. But eventually, all that is information, right? All that is information which is stored in the form of a data somewhere in a database, maybe a file server, etc., etc. Right? Now, traditionally, all this was very easy to be managed, to be honest, because everything was in house. Yeah. And I'm sure you guys would agree, because at least by reading through your curriculum, this is some vision, or this is the kind of picture you may have in your mind if you haven't started working already in the industry, right? So traditionally, the enterprise would have all of these different tenants, or all of these different components within the enterprise. Now, 2000, around 2007-ish or 2008-ish, that is when, if you see, companies like Salesforce, companies like Microsoft, companies like Google, around 2009-ish, 10-ish, companies like Amazon, they started coming up and they started talking about cloud. It's not that, of course, as Brian well mentioned, that cloud was always there in form of different forms, in terms of internet, in terms of VPNs and so forth. But then it was not formally there, right? As in what we have today. And all of these was working fine till 2005 and 2006, 2007 even. But suddenly there were some companies which kind of changed their way of working, way of delivering IT to their users, because the sudden change also happened on the reason why, because the behavior of this user changed, in the sense the user kind of started working not only from the office, but they kind of went out and they started working from different places as well. They may work from their home, they may work from coffee shops, they may work from customer places, partner places, vendors, etc., etc. So the user came out of the office and they started working from different places, right? The applications, on the other hand, were kind of facing bottleneck issues in terms of the capacity within that specific enterprise. So it was kind of facing that claustrophobic in terms of the capacity which an IT would deliver for that specific enterprise. The resources was always low in the capacity. Hence, when the resources goes low in the capacity, the end user experience for this person kind of was going down. Right now, of course, I can go ahead and increase that capacity to bring in more enhanced end user experience. But the problem is, the scale of the user also was not known as the IT became more and more matured, as the world became more and more matured from 2000 to 2007, right? So the issue is, the user started using a lot of different applications, and hence the IT, who is kind of managing all of these services, they were not able to kind of catch up with the demands in terms of coming from the user, in terms of coming from the various different stakeholders within the enterprise, right? And on the other hand, this guy, the volume of the data which was getting stored by these different applications and by the users itself was also kind of increasing ever. It never had a chance to look at a scenario where specific organizations data consumption would have reduced. In fact, if you look at the US Patriotic Act, if you look at the Singapore Data Protection Act, if you look at the GDPR in the Europe and the UK regions, and of course our own India, we've got the Data Privacy Act. So all of these, on the other hand, from the 2008ish times, if you see, the politically also things changed, and the data sovereignty became one of those points which used to be, or which got to be discussed in the various different corporates and the enterprises and the political arena, right? Which means when there is a question around data sovereignty, either you're going to migrate the data from wherever you have been storing, or on the other hand, due to certain compliance reasons, you need to kind of store that specific data for specific duration of time to kind of face any audits and such different requirements from the government for the large enterprises, right? So all these things were increasing. On the other hand, hence the storage demands were increasing. Of course, on the other hand, the user is kind of adding more and more data as the user is kind of maturing. Also, the applications were getting matured. Hence, again, there is a demand from the application side as well. Plus the resources which was allocated in terms of that specific application, they were also kind of increasing in terms of demand. Right now, all of these things were happening, and hence there was a very emergency requirement for companies in the market to kind of explore this opportunity. On the other hand, also give and provide solution to the large enterprises who were facing this crunch, right, from all the different sides. Now, if you see, this is where, of course, this is where companies like Salesforce, they bloomed from the year 2000. In fact, Salesforce came in the, if you look at their establishment, they came around 2000, but then, they kind of become very evident in the years 2007, 2008. 2008, we've got the Amazon, which which introduced elastic cloud compute, which is also known as EC2. Then we had Google announcing their services. We've had Microsoft announcing their services in 2008. They started in 2010. They released their first cloud product in terms of Microsoft BPOS and Windows Azure, as it was known those days. So if you see, this is the era when the real advent of cloud actually started, so that to kind of have a very ambitious goal to solve all of these problems, which were emerging problems of the enterprise, irrespective of the size, right? And why I say irrespective of the size, because it's not that only large companies have the cloud requirements, or these kind of requirements. Even small companies have these kind of requirements. Why? Because don't forget, even their users are very mobile, and they are very productive, and they are kind of moving around from one place to another place. Now, as I said, eventually any specific service or the product which is being serviced by IT today is, kind of resolving these three problems. One is the user, the second is the application, and the third is, of course, the data. Now, when we talk about cloud computing helps us to kind of resolve the challenges what we saw in the initial discussion, so that now I have something which is sitting not in my premises, hence managed by somebody else as well, or maybe co-managed by somebody else, so that I bring my application here into a service, or a third-party service, or third-party product called as cloud. And then, of course, I move my data as well into cloud, which is then managed, or rather well managed by large companies and the established companies such as Microsoft or Amazon or Google or many more, right? So we know Alibaba, and in India we have got NTT Data, and so many different providers have actually come in to kind of solve this problem, right? So when we kind of move the applications and move our data to the cloud, I'm now able to kind of allow my users to kind of work from anywhere and any device and any place, so that they can now consume my application and my data, because they are going around and with just meager internet itself, they are able to connect to my application. Right now, one of the very best use case of the cloud which we are leveraging right now in this session is Zoom itself, right? So Zoom is an audio video collaboration and communication application which is running over the internet, where the servers are not hosted anywhere, either at your place, neither at my place, but it is hosted somewhere here in the cloud, and we are all sitting remotely and accessing and leveraging all those services from the Zoom's cloud services, correct? So, and this is just a small story which I kind of brought in, but of course if you look at the scale of the story, it goes enterprisely large in terms of the volume which the data and the volume of the data which cloud can handle, the volume of which the applications can be hosted in the cloud is completely infinite in terms of the services offered today, right? So that's the kind of uh, use case, and the reason why we've got cloud. Right now, let's kind of try to move one step ahead in terms of uh, if this use case is good, then what do I call a specific product or a specific service as a cloud product or a cloud service, right? There has to be certain definition, right? Because if I ask someone today, right, what is cloud, everybody has got their own formats of definition and their own forms of definition to define the cloud, right? But then, is there any single definition which can help us to understand and define what is cloud and why cloud, or rather, what is cloud, whether it's a product, whether it's a service, what are the attributes which a cloud product or a service should have, and so forth? um, Yes, so there is one body which is kind of define the cloud product or a service, and that body is known as NIST, right? So NIST is National Institute of Standards and Technology. I'm sure as part of your own curriculum, you might have come across this specific body, because I'm sure the curriculum talks about a lot of different standards, IETF and ISO, and ARPANET and so forth, and NIST is one of them, right? So it's kind of a body which has got a white paper to define the cloud product and the cloud service. Now, if you see, I've been interchangeably using the cloud as a product and cloud as a service. So does that mean that a cloud can be offered as a service and a product both? In a nutshell, yes, right? So you can have cloud as a product, cloud as a service as well, right? Now, before I jump to the product and the service differentiation, let us first understand what are the various components of a typical cloud computing product or a service, and then we'll kind of try to evolve more in the specific session, in the specific discussion. Right now, typically, as I said, the cloud product or a service is defined by NIST, and more or less, this specific cloud would have these components. One, of course, it would provide you a compute power. Second, it will provide you with the storage requirements for your enterprise, for your customers, for the organizations, and so forth. Three, of course, it gives us the various different networking requirements in terms of hosting that application, hosting that data, and so forth. And of course, very importantly, helping us to run the analytics so that we can visualize and validate and verify all those telemetry information which comes from various different sensors, devices, products, users, etc., etc. Right? So all this is being now handled by a third party with their own pooled resources, and hence we don't have to think about it, and all that comes from the different service level agreements and with the guarantees as well, uh, so that we can offload all of these components to a third party. Now if we talk about very key concepts, or rather key features of cloud, of course, I think someone already mentioned that cloud gives us the scalability, elasticity, agility, and all those things, right? And I'm sure these all terms may not be new for all of you, because this specific terminologies is being projected and portrayed in each of the different products and services which you might go through today. And just if you search for what is cloud computing, all these different terminologies will anyways come up. But the question to understand is, what do I do with these features, right? Yeah, I understand, it is agile, it is scalable, it is, it is elastic in nature, it gives me fault tolerance, blah blah blah. But then what an enterprise could leverage from all of these attributes? So before that, we have to understand what these terminologies first of all means in terms of English, and before we kind of go ahead and understand what the specific attributes helps us to kind of or rather helps an enterprise to kind of leverage all of these terminologies. So I'm not of course going to go through each of them, but pick up some very important ones. Now in the terms of agility, right? Now if I look from a uh, from an English dictionary perspective, I'm sure uh, all of us would understand what does agile means, right? Agile, whenever I talk about agile, at least for me, the first thing which comes to my mind is cheetah, the picture of cheetah, right? uh, and when I think about the animal cheetah, the first thing which I think about is the speed and the fastness and the fast response and so forth, right? So anything and everything which is faster, right? But also on the other hand, it's just not being fast, it's also being effective, and it's also being precise every time I do something with that specific speed, right? Now the cloud is meant to be and designed in such a way that it allows us, or it allows the IT team for a large enterprise to deliver that specific services, as we saw in the previous whiteboard, for the ever growing demand of the user and the application, in such a way that it's always agile, which means it's always fast, or rather it's rapidly deployed and rapidly delivered to the users increasing demand. And on the other hand, it's always consistent, which is more important, because traditionally when the things were being hosted in house, things were not agile in nature, in terms of, yes, of course, performance was not a problem because everything was on premise, I could always pay money and bring upgrade my infrastructure. But on the other hand, the effectiveness was a problem, the consistency was a problem. Some users may get a good response basis on my connections with my IT team and my relationship with the IT team. Some users may face a problem because on the relationship with their IT team. So all of these issues now gets resolved while I move my workloads into the cloud, because then I'm able to make my infrastructure and my services more agile in nature, faster, and very importantly, quote unquote, effective, which is more important with the agile. On the other hand, we always attribute elasticity with cloud. right? Now, of course, elastic, again, if I think about word elastic in my mind, the first thing which comes to my mind is an elastic band, a rubber band, right? And the rubber band is in terms of, if I stretch the rubber band, it will stretch. If I leave the stretch, of if I ease the stretch, of course it will come back to its normal shape, right? Now, in the various industries what we live in today, of course, even in the pandemic situation where we are, it's very appropriate use case to define elasticity, because there could be various different companies in the market. Let's talk about, of course, nothing against any of these companies which we're going to discuss. We just want to discuss the use case of it, right? Let's talk about companies such as Swiggy or Zomato, right? Now, these companies, I call it as born in cloud companies, because these companies like came up 3 to 4 years back, and they were able to leverage the power of cloud in terms of hosting their application and infrastructure on certain services such as cloud computing. Right now, if you look at their business model, everything is online, right? We've got the mobile app, we've got the users connecting or leveraging the mobile app, placing the order, which kind of goes to Swiggy's backend application servers, etc., etc. And then you are able to do a payment, you are able to receive the order status, able to receive the status of the delivery boy, you're able to track the location, and all of those stuff is happening within your application. Right now, things were good when they started, because 3 years back this industry was booming. There were some food pandas and all those different companies which existed, and the online app business was blooming, and hence, of course, the food delivery applications as well. Now, what has happened right now in 2020, as we talk right now in July? Their business, of course, of the obvious reasons, has not been doing such good what they had been doing maybe last year, right? I'm sure their sales figures have dropped in terms of the business they are doing, for an obvious reason, thanks to COVID-19. Right now, for these kind of companies, if they would have gone traditionally, in the way that if they go no, traditionally in terms of deploy their entire IT infrastructure as a non-cloud infrastructure, then eventually they may have to pay upfront for servers, for storage, for network, for people, for cooling, for everything which goes into an IT infrastructure, right? And in this kind of days where we are looking at a um, sudden spike, and then we've got a sudden downfall in terms of business, unfortunately they will be into such a huge loss, because they would have invested into so much of IT infrastructure, which goes into crores and crores of investments, which will be nowhere used because of very weak response from the customer side. Right now, if I now convert this scenario wherein this kind of applications are hosted in cloud, because of the elasticity and the agility and the ability of the cloud to allow me scale in whenever required, scale out whenever required, right? Scale up whenever required, scale down whenever required. I am able to kind of, uh, upfront deploy my infrastructure, and again bring down or scale down my infrastructure whenever there is no demand from my customer. Right, so you know it appears to be like your rubber band, right, where you could have stretched whenever you required that much stretch to tie something, and you could go back to the normal shape, or maybe reduce the stretch to tie something which is not that wide enough. Right now, this is exactly helping the born in cloud companies such as Swiggy, Zomatos, and such companies, because they are able to leverage the cloud and kind of only pay for what they are using. And if the demand goes down, the servers are automatically deprovisioned, and they are only paying for the infrastructure which they are using, and they don't pay for the infrastructure which they are not using. Right, on the other hand, the data remains then and there itself, and the application is capable enough to again scale up. So whenever there is a COVID-19 situation is gone off, I hope it sooner goes off. And when the businesses come back on demand, the companies who have already leveraged the cloud computing services, they will be able to scale out and scale up and meet customer demands very easily, because of the default nature of the cloud itself. Right. So that is what we mean by elasticity. And the rest, of course, the rest of the attributes, they kind of, also helps the customers to kind of, go and service their users in much more, much more comprehensive way. Right. So as I said, the users are kind of now moving out there. We are in this COVID-19 situation, we are working from home, a lot of such companies. So imagine a large enterprise, let's assume a Mercedes-Benz kind of a company, or maybe let's say, a Coca-Cola type of enterprise, or TCS kind of an enterprise has started working from home, right? So, TCS has announced that their 90% of employees are going to work from home till 2021, correct? Now, imagine their strength, and the employees are going to work from home. Now, if they don't have their services hosted as a cloud service, they won't be able to kind of meet the growing demands of the users who are working outside from their office, and also on the other hand maintain the same security posture for the applications they are accessing, for the data they are accessing outside their office, which is completely unsecured, right? So cloud kind of brings us all those abilities to kind of allow our users to continue access their applications while they kind of work from anywhere, plus the other attributes as we talked about, right? Now, which means, when a customer, or when an enterprise, or when an organization onboards the journey of cloud, they are able to leverage the economies of scale as well. Now, what does this terminology economies of scale means? I'm sure you've been hearing a lot around scalability, agility, elasticity, and so forth, right? But to be honest, very importantly, there are two things, or two terminologies, or two technologies rather, which you need to understand and which you need to digest, so that you can understand the overall dynamics of cloud computing much more better. Is one is, of course, organizations able to leverage the economies of scale, and second is the self-service. I'll come to the self-service part in a while. Let's talk about economies of scale, because we are talking about all economic stuff here right now. So let's talk about the economies of scale. Now, economies of scale means, if you are a organization, maybe a smaller organization, but you still want to kind of need to comply to various different obligations of your region, of your country, of your you need to have your data sovereignty. Now again, what a classic use case. We've in government of India has banned 59 Chinese applications. Why? Because it was found that they were kind of not complying to the data sovereignty law, which government of India passed last year, in terms of Data Privacy Act, right? Now, of course, somebody was somebody had been snooping on this data, and hence the data sovereignty was not maintained, and it was kind of a breach of the law, which we had passed last year, right? Now, if I am a small application company, let's say I have a mobile app, correct, and I've been using a traditional infrastructure, and if I have to maintain all this data sovereignty, I have to make sure that data lies in India only. I have to maintain all of those security, compliance, and various different controls. I'll have to invest into so much of infrastructure and so much of technology. On the other hand, if I move all of my applications to the cloud, I am able to automatically leverage all of these various different requirements, because the compliances and the controls and the security requirements, they are already complied by the vendors like Microsoft or Amazon or Google. They already certified to this different various compliances based on different regions, and hence I'm able to kind of leverage the economies of scale what they have already invested on, so that I can only focus on my line of business rather than investing and thinking about IT, right? So one of the drivers for a company, small, medium, large, is the economies of scale in terms of leveraging all of those investments, which a provider would have already done in terms of complying to their different requirements of the customer, right? Um, from an industry use case perspective, if you see, there are n number of industry use cases, right? We talked about those e-commerce applications like Swiggy or Flipkart or Zomato or such. But then it's not only those different industries or e-commerce industries or retail they are leveraging, but then I used to work with Volkswagen, via IBM, of course. And I was placed in their manufacturing, one of those manufacturing zone units which they had in Pune for a month or so to kind of, upgrade their overall data center infrastructure. Now, when we talk about companies such as Volkswagen, um, you know, uh, since being a German company, of course, they don't compromise on the quality and the overall safety of the products which they deliver. Hence, they do lot and lot of testings via various different permutations, combinations, various different mathematical models which they have built over the period of time, which their scientists have built over the period of time. Right now, if I have to run these mathematical large calculations, I would need enormous compute. In the compute world, we call it as big compute, right? I would need enormous compute to run this mathematical calculations. And the cluster or the infrastructure which I was working on personally from IBM for that specific customer was a 150 node cluster environment for just one application, right? So imagine the kind of scale which we were running that specific one single mathematical calculation, which was, by the way, supposed to do the calculation for finding out all those different outputs in terms of if there is a crash, right, of a specific car which they were testing in the simulated zone. uh, how many different bones and what are the different areas where the passengers will be affected, right? So you might have seen NCAP and all those different scenarios and the various testings which happens by the different automotive industries, right? I've seen that live, being in Volkswagen, where they kind of bring the car to the crash situation, and they kind of run a simulation and find out what are different areas which will the passengers will be affected. Now, to kind of conclude on this specific different simulations and different situations, there are large mathematical calculations which are done for crash test simulation, and these are calculated across various different nodes with a lot of data processing which happens. And it's not a we don't have that much of time to kind of explain you that how does it work. But then it's not a simple calculation, and it's not a simple way of calculation or traditional way of calculation. It is done across these different nodes, right? But then the moot point here is, if when we were there, we always had a crunch in terms of the infrastructure on premise, right? Because I had to add more and more nodes so that the guys on the field can do more such calculations and come out with better results and faster results in lesser time, because that was required for them to deliver those specific models which they were manufacturing. Now, if there was cloud in those days, which we have right now, of course, we have high performance compute scenarios which can be now run on the cloud itself. So such mathematical calculations can be the derivations can be done on the cloud itself, where the analytics can be also done on the cloud, where I can have the dashboard being published for all my required different stakeholders. Now, hence, a lot of automotive industries, they kind of leverage the power of cloud. On the other hand, I'm working with a customer right now, which is in Mumbai, of course, a large, a media-based company, wherein we are, because of their creative digital artists, they are working from home. They are kind of missing their Macs, which had 32 GBs and 64 GBs of RAM to kind of work on the, the various different creative work which they used to do in where when they were in office, for doing a lot of video edits and doing a lot of high profile image edits in terms of Photoshop and Maya and all those complicated applications, right? Now what we have done is we have actually moved them to cloud. We have running those workstations, those high performance workstations on the cloud, so that number one, of course, we are leveraging the cloud to allow them to connect and do the similar type of compute on the cloud without being there in the office. Also, on the other hand, we are leveraging applications such as batch processing and data visualization to kind of help them to offload their encoding and decoding and all those requirements in the cloud. So you see, it's not only automotive, it's not only financial institutions, but also media companies, also engineering companies, retail, manufacturing. Everybody is using cloud in some shape or form these days, right? And of course, as we go more and more deep in terms of the situation where we are in right now, because of this pandemic, the necessity of this kind of services will of course go ahead and increase as we move ahead, right? Because that's the overall mood point of this session today, right? To understand what are the opportunities what you have and leverage the overall intelligence of what we have within the specific cloud, right? Now, of course, while we talk about cloud, there are various different cloud providers. We've got public cloud. Public cloud is what which is hosted and accessed over the internet, typically, right? Like Microsoft Azure, Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, Gmail, Office 365. These are all examples of public cloud, which means it is managed and hosted over the internet and could be accessed over the internet, and being managed by a third party provider itself. Then we've got private cloud. That's another cloud type wherein you've the organizations or different manufacturing companies like Volkswagen and Coca-Cola and Pepsi, they don't host their clouds to public. Rather, they kind of host the cloud in-house within their own data centers, but then it is also managed by their own IT team. Now, the only difference between the traditional way of computing and the managing a cloud in-house in your own data centers is the way you deliver. Because apart from cloud being cloud, cloud is also the change in the way you are delivering things to your end users via different means and methods, in terms of, very importantly, self-service way. Correct. So when the cloud is being delivered to the end users versus traditionally what it was delivered, right now, when we talk about cloud, we talk about more of self-service delivery as well. Now, of course, there are public, private, and there is a hybrid cloud model as well, where an organization can run a combination of public and private, so that some applications can run on premises on their own data centers. Some applications can run on the public cloud, where you can have a complete hybrid kind of an infrastructure between some applications being hosted in-house, some applications being hosted on cloud, and users can still leverage the power of cloud across these different premises, right? So you can also have a mix and match of different cloud services. Now, as we talk about public, private, and hybrid, very importantly, there is a kind of a deployment model as well, which is involved when we are talking about cloud. One of the model we have is the infrastructure as a service, which is a most basic cloud computing service, wherein like what we do on premises in terms of creating virtual machines, putting storages, and configuring network. Similarly, we do on the cloud services as well, which we call it as infrastructure as a service. Again, the economies and the basic parameters remains the same for even these type of services. The second type of service we have is the platform as a service. Now, platform as a service is the one of the most modern and the evolving concept within the overall cloud services, right? So we are talking about the Amazon Web Services. We are talking about the Azure platform as a service. We're talking about the Google's TensorFlow, and the various different Oracle cloud services, or rather IBM Bluemix. These are all examples of platform as a service. Typically, I'm sure, as you are from engineering background, you'll be doing a lot of coding around various different your one of from within your favorite languages which you may use, right? Now typically, while you build an application using your favorite code, you run infrastructure to run that specific application code, right? Let's say you're building a two-tier application where you've got a front-end web server and you've got a database, right? Very, very small type of application you have built using the code. Now to run that front-end web server, you need either Apache Tomcat, or you need IaaS such applications to run that front-end web server. And of course, to host that database, you would need SQL or MySQL or MongoDB or such databases, whatever you feel like, right? Now, traditionally, we used to kind of create or install these servers, or install these applications onto servers, or maybe we'll create a virtual machine and we'll install these servers on that specific virtual machine. Now with platform as a service, the ecosystem which is required for you to develop and host these applications, the ecosystem is provided, which means the Apache Tomcat, the IaaS, the SQL database, it's provided to you as a developer. And while you create and compile this code, you can directly host your application onto this ecosystem where everything is managed behind the scenes by the service provider, whether it is Microsoft or Amazon or Google or so forth. You just need to maintain your code. You just need to focus on your code. So PaaS is typically for all of those budding software engineers, which I would highlight, wherein if you are looking at your career more from an software engineering perspective, have your focus around platform as a service, and the products and the various different services around the platform as a service, because this is one of the areas which is now coming up very fastly and very rapidly, because one of the very key reasons is driving this platform as a service is non-maintenance of the server infrastructure. And that is the reason why you see a sudden boom of companies such as Docker, Google Kubernetes, and all of these have come up. It's only because you can now run all your code, all your mathematical models, all your machine learning models, all your AI bots, everything on a serverless infrastructure without even worrying about any hardware or any worrying about any specific virtual machines or such infrastructure, right? So platform as a service is something which which kind of allows you to leverage the hosting of all your application. On the other hand, we have got the third type, which is the software as a service, which is very typical. The Gmail, Zoom, Office 365, they're all examples of software as a service, right? Application or software which is already developed by a certain vendor, and it is available to you as a user to use as a service, is something which is known as SaaS. But then again, there are various use cases. But for you as an engineering or you as an engineer, I would say infrastructure as a service and the platform as a service are the areas which you can look at as you move forward in your career. I know I'm kind of falling short on time, so I would want to kind of quickly come to a point where, how do I start? Now all this is good. All these lectures are good, but where do I start? Where do I take my first step? So I hope you are able to take a screenshot of this specific slide. And of course, if this is being recorded, maybe you can come back and have a look at these links. So I've kind of compiled various different free learning resources which you can leverage. And very importantly, out of which I want to kind of highlight is this specific URL from Microsoft, because it's got the free access to Microsoft Azure subscription, as well as, it has got enormous library of the videos which you can leverage, whether you have interest in IoT or whether you have interest in building bots, or kind of working in AI, building machine learning models, leveraging the platform as a services, leveraging function as a service, and so forth. All those different videos are available free there, in the specific URL. Same goes with Google as well as AWS as well. So you can kind of kickstart your learning there. Kata Coda is something which I would personally recommend. That is how even I started my kicks learning around the application coding. Kata Coda is a platform which gives you a real-time lab, wherein if you are interested in, let's say, learning Python, and you don't need to have a machine, you can have in your iPad or your any laptop, and just open the browser, go to katacoda.com, sign up, and there are labs which you can spin up, which again runs in the cloud itself, and you can run all your codes and all your different type of application. You can build your application on the Kata Coda platform. Plus, of course, it has got step-by-step learning manuals as well, which you can refer, learn, understand, and also execute on the cloud itself. edX, I hope you may already be aware of. If not, you can of course bookmark that. edx.org is a platform where you get all the different popular subjects, whether it is Azure, AWS, Google, data science, machine learning, and this is all curated by Harvard and MIT and such universities, where they've got their courses uploaded, which you can leverage. You can either follow a full curriculum, or you can also look at more silo videos to kind of explore more in your favorite areas. Yeah. So I hope you might have taken the screenshot of it. And again, of course, very quickly, these are some of the numbers which we are looking at in terms of opportunity. So the market is growing and again, this is not something which I'm making up, neither exaggerated. This is something which are real numbers coming from Forrester and such agencies, which are kind of surveying the requirements around various enterprises, even in the unfortunate situation where we are in. If you see, the only industry apart from pharmacy, or the pharmaceuticals, is the only other industry which is making progress is information technology, and that is what is driving even the stock markets these days, right? So because of course the requirements are not going down, the growth is still there, and IT is the essential service, and the cloud is again one of those most critical components to deliver these services. Hence, I would suggest you to kind of explore your career around cloud services, and various different products and the tools and the services which exist in the cloud services. So that's the kind of market we are looking at worldwide, right, in terms of the overall cloud. So there could be various different role-based careers, whether you could start being envisioning yourself as a cloud administrator. If you're interested more in artificial intelligence, you could start envisioning yourself as an artificial intelligence developer or engineer or AI edge engineer. You of course you can start be a traditional developer, maybe start coding in C# or .NET Core, or maybe Java and such different languages, and still leverage the services in the cloud, because the code languages and these different languages and the frameworks and the OOPS concept, they don't go away, right? So they're going to still be there. It's just that the infrastructure on which you're going to now host your application is going to be provided by the cloud. So kind of a map of all the various different role-based careers what you have right now as we move forward. Yeah. So again, I don't want to kind of spill over on the times which I had for the specific talk and the conversation, I would say. I'm open to any questions. So if you have any questions, please feel free to post any questions and I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that wonderful session. So we have few students who have some queries. So with your permission, can I start with the Q&A session?
Yeah, please. And apologies for the 8 minutes delay in the session.
That's okay. So there are many various types of components involved in cloud platforms, ranging from storage types, whether to have a SSD or persistent disk and so on. So how to decide upon these things? Like what should we take into consideration while selecting these components?
Okay. So basically, these components, they kind of directly correspond to the kind of applications which you're going to host and develop on these specific different resources, whether it is a mission critical application, like for example, SAP or a critical ERP application for a company, then of course the configuration would be in terms of SSD and various different high performance storage and the compute which comes in the cloud. If the requirement is more for development, more for test, you could go with a normal non SSDs and all those different non high performance infrastructure which you can leverage in the cloud.
Thank you, sir. Your second question: is it possible to have software as a service for CAD or CAM on cloud?
Yes and no, right? So again, it depends whether the specific application vendor would provide. Let's say, for example, CAD, I'm not sure, but then let's say Photoshop, right? Which is very similar to what CAD does. Of course, CAD is much more engineering, but Photoshop from a velocity perspective is the same. So Photoshop is available in a SaaS model, right? So you can leverage the Photoshop on a browser, on iPads using the SaaS model. I'm sure sooner you'll have the CAD applications as well. There are not exactly CAD, but there are other applications like Draw.io and various different applications which we have, which are available in software as a service. But if you're looking at specifically auto applications from Autodesk, which is AutoCAD, very famously known, it's still being available in the form of a normal traditional software. But yes, there are possibilities, of course, to come in SaaS model as well.
Thank you so much, sir, for answering our queries. Over to you, Brianna.
Thank you so much, Athira. And thank you so much, sir, for that wonderful session. I would now like to invite Ms. Sana Sheikh, Head of Department of Computer Engineering of Don Bosco Institute of Technology, to propose the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Brianna. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Don Bosco Institute of Technology, Computer Department, I would like to take the opportunity to thank our speaker for today, Mr. Gaurav Dharasania, for accepting our invitation. We extend our sincere gratitude towards your contribution for the webinar on leveraging the intelligence of cloud computing. We truly appreciate your commendable efforts in delivering the relevant content. It's really useful and very much required for our students. Hope to have more such fruitful sessions and associations in the future too. I would also like to express my sincere gratitude to our Director, Father Colbert Da Silva, Executive Director, Father Mario Vaz, Administrator, Father McInerney, our advisor, Dr. Krishnamurthy, our dearest principal, Dr. Prasanna Nambiar, our department mentors, Dr. Amya Kumar Tripathi and Dr. Feroz Sheikh, our Dean Administrator, Mr. Imran Ali Mirza, and all the faculty members. Last but not the least, an organizing team, the ACM Student Chapter, student volunteers for their technical support and cooperation. Let me now give my special thanks to the event coordinator, Ms. Shanila Mullah, for organizing this webinar and making this program successful in every aspect. A big thanks to all the participants for joining us today. Once again, thank you all. Stay home, stay safe. Over to you, Diana.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for those beautiful words. And Gaurav, sir, on behalf of all the students who are attending this, I would like to express a heartfelt gratitude to you. This session not only emphasized on the importance of cloud computing, but also how we could actually get onto the field and how we should actually go on learning and improving ourselves. Thank you so much, sir. Now, I thank all of you who are attending this. Till the next time we meet with another beautiful venture to improve our knowledge and dive deeper into the world of computers. This is Brianna Rajan from the entire team signing off. Thank you.